Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, we're going to talk about Secretary of State Anthony Blinken just getting back from his 2 weeks abroad, and one of his stops was in the NATO headquarters in Brussels. So we'll talk about those details. Also, we have China and Iran with a pretty big oil deal. Strengthening their ties. And then also Russia and China, two superpowers, they're strengthening their relations as well. And also we have a pretty important message from the CDC director and expressing quite a bit of emotion on where the coronavirus is heading and what people need to do. So we'll have those details as well. But first, the U.S. is now claiming Pyongyang could once again be a threat to its neighbors. Now, this comes after Japanese officials report 2 ballistic missiles were fired from North Korea into the sea near the Hamgyong province in Japan.
That's right. Al Jazeera's Rob McBride, reporting from Seoul, South Korea, said it is quite a significant development. It happened early Thursday morning and was first detected by the Japanese Coast Guard, later confirmed by officials here in South Korea as being 2 projectiles flying south some 450 kilometers. Now, McBride said both Japanese and U.S. officials confirm these were ballistic missiles.
Well, it has been more than a year since North Korea tested such a provocative missile. Now, since the U.S. and North Korean negotiations to denuclearize deteriorated, the Northern Peninsula has continued testing weapons, but of much shorter range and less threat. Well, the kind allowable by UN resolutions. However, ballistic missiles have a much larger impact and, of course, greater range that North Korea's neighbors and the U.S. can't ignore.
Japan's Prime Minister Yoshida Suga, condemning the test, made this statement. He said, "It is a threat to our country and to our security. It is also a violation of the UN Security Council resolution. We strictly protest and condemn their actions." Well, he also warned, "I'm determined to closely cooperate with the United States, South Korea, and other related nations to protect the lives of our people."
Well, Japan has stopped short of making any retaliatory move against North Korea, waiting instead for its U.S. allies to see what strategy the new administration wants to put into practice. However, from the other end of the binoculars, it looks like North Korea is not holding back on its weapons development and possibly wants to put some pressure on U.S. President Joe Biden and his staff.
Well, moving west now to Egypt and a catastrophe that has unfolded in one of the most famous man-made shipping passages of all times. It's on any given day, the Suez Canal has about 50 ships passing through it, but currently the Ever Given, one of the world's largest container ships, has run aground in that particular busy seaway. The ship measuring 400 meters, which is as long as the Empire State's Building is tall, and it weighs around 200,000 tons.
Well, the maritime accident occurred when high winds blew the massive ship off course, causing it to get lodged in the canal. Now, the Suez Canal is so important because it connects the Red Sea to the Mediterranean, providing the shortest route from Asia to Europe. Now, today, 12% of all global trade passes through its short 190-kilometer distance. Now, before it was built, sea trade routes were forced to travel all the way around the continent of Africa, some 15,000 miles. Now the trip is reduced by over 4,300 miles thanks to the canal.
Well, the vessel registered in Panama is carrying around 20,000 100,000 shipping containers and is operated by a Taiwanese company, a transport company called Evergreen Marine. Now, it was making its way from China to the port of Rotterdam, Netherlands, when it got stuck in the canal. While the Japanese owner has apologized, he has also acknowledged the extreme difficulties of the situation. Chief Cabinet Secretary for Japan has stated, "At present, the traffic along the Suez Canal has been disrupted due to the incident, and local authorities are working on resolving the issue using tugboats, but there's no estimated time for it to be resolved."
Well, ship tracking websites show the true scale of the accident. There is now a backlog of more than 150 vessels blocked from moving through the canal at several points. Now, from the northern entrance of the canal at Port Said, in the middle of the canal at the Bitter Lakes, and also at the southern entrance of Suez. Now, merchandise of all kind passes through this important waterway to Europe, including a great majority of oil from the Persian Gulf. And due to the traffic jam, oil prices themselves have risen sharply.
Going up. Well, economically speaking, the implications are said to be in the billions of dollars. Well, what's particularly concerning, says Lawrence Brennan of Fordham University School of Law, is that a lot of the losses are delay losses without actual physical damage that implicates particular admiral rules that may prevent innocent parties from recovering their damages from the ship owners.
Well, according to Egyptian officials, there are about 8 tugboats or more working tirelessly to dislodge the Ever Given, but experts say it could take anywhere from days to weeks to accomplish the task. Now, with such an unknown and so much money at stake, other ships are considering traveling around the Horn of Africa once again, which will cost more time and money, delaying their deliveries by weeks. Now, not all the vessels even have this as an option, and we'll just have to wait it out and see how long it takes until the cork, so to speak, is removed from the bottle.
Well, have you ever wondered why there is such a huge price tag attached to creating vaccines? Well, just who pays for this and how long? This video takes a look at all of this and what role the vaccine alliances plays. Take a look at this next video.
Of all the products in the world, you don't want to use market-based prioritization. It's got to be vaccines.
There's no technology known to man now that is faster than mRNA.
Because of this monopoly or duopoly position that the sellers are in, it tends to have a high amount of market power and ability to get higher prices.
But bringing them to market involves huge investments, complex science, and secretive contracts. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, few people paid attention to the business models behind vaccines. The global pharmaceutical market was worth $1.3 trillion in 2019. The global pharmaceutical market was worth $1.3 trillion in 2019. The global pharmaceutical market was worth $1.3 trillion in 2019. Vaccines made up just 3% of that, generating around $33 billion of revenue. That compared to $142 billion from cancer drugs. So how do the economics of vaccines work? Who funds them? How profitable are they? And will the COVID-19 pandemic and new technology disrupt the vaccine market forever? Until recently, there have really only been 4 main players in the vaccine market: GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, Pfizer, and Sanofi. They represented 90% of vaccine industry revenues in 2019. Even for these market leaders, developing a vaccine is a costly and time-consuming gamble. The process often takes a decade.
Work on infectious diseases is often very obscure because the burden is so much out of sight in the rich countries and where the deep scientific and manufacturing power is.
Government is the main funder of the science. Government is the main funder of the science, and that's critical. And all of the benefits we have today, if you think about the sequence analysis or the mRNAs and the biotechnology, the new manufacturing, all of that came out of investments in basic science.
While 50 to 70% our vaccines in phase 3 trials end up being approved.
They will only invest once the market and the chances of success are well known. This doesn't mean there's zero risk, but largely what we see is that the public sector takes on most of that. Indeed, this is what allows the business of vaccines to operate.
The cost of creating a vaccine varies widely. On average, it ranges from several hundred million to a few $billions. Supply, demand, and pricing for vaccines are determined by a small number of actors. On the buyer side, national governments and organizations like Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, and UNICEF are among the biggest purchasers. On the seller side are the pharma companies. Because the development costs and regulatory barriers for vaccines are high, companies can maintain their monopolies for longer.
They tend to have a high amount of market power and ability to get higher prices than, let's say, a generic small molecule drug or even a vaccine for which we have lots of competitors.
Well, interesting video, and you could see the huge money that is in the pharmaceuticals. I think they said $1.3 trillion. Yeah. So, you know, that in the vaccines there, you see how it is a big money-making venture. For sure. Well, now to the distressing situation in Southeast Asia. The country of Myanmar, also known as Burma, has fallen into chaos since a coup led by the country's security forces took place at the beginning of February. Now, the latest reporting from ABC News indicates over 100 people were killed by the military in just one day. Now, this is the highest number of casualties so far and includes children among the victims.
The United Nations envoy describing the violence is quoted as saying, "They're determined to kill as many people as possible," unquote. Well, however, this is not stopping demonstrators from coming out against what they believe is an illegal takeover of their government. While the military celebrated their Armed Forces Day in the capital and other parts of the country, they were using the same military to brutally beat and kill protesters.
Well, in total, the death toll has reached over 400 since February 1st. Now, this is the date when former leader Aung San Suu Kyi and other elected officials were arrested on charges of election fraud. Now, the charges have not been verified, and therefore the people are angry that their freedom to choose their leaders is being undermined.
While neither side in the crisis is showing signs of surrender, the U.S. is lending its support to the protesters. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made comment that he was horrified by the bloodshed in Myanmar and tweeted, "The United States will continue to take firm action against those who perpetuate violence against the people of Burma as they demand the restoration of their democratically elected government."
Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent Larry McGee, who's been covering a couple stories, that China-Iran deal we mentioned earlier, but also has a message from the CDC director there, the new CDC director, and you can tell she's pretty emotional about her address. Right. Larry, what exactly did Rochelle Walensky have to say?
Those who still possess some degree of cognitive clarity and responsibleness are having difficulties holding back severe fear at the potential impact of the plague's increasing intensity and a generalized state of impaired global immunity. And out of an apparent abundance of that came forth a statement from the director of the CDC recently expressing in near tears the fact that she is afraid. The director's emotional plea was an outgrowth of what she believes is impending doom. The CDC head is worried about the trajectory of the virus based on large-scale relaxation of restrictions, which has been accompanied by spikes. Mrs. Walensky is calling for unity among government and health officials to try to prevent a full-blown fourth surge. The insurgence of hostility and tension between the U.S. and its competitors is not abated in any way despite the world's current health crisis, and it is now poised to kick up a notch as China moves to extend a financial hand to the Iranian economy. It is actually a part of a deal reportedly worth $400 billion, where in exchange for Chinese investment in Iran, Iran will guarantee a steady supply of its oil. Beijing says the agreement represents a fulfillment of its promises under the nuclear agreement, but America sees it as an act of Chinese emboldenment. In response, the U.S. is reportedly planning to launch the usual war games as a scare tactic and to showcase its military might. But China, government and professionals alike, are not showing any signs of intimidation. YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Baton Jeff, back to you.
Pretty powerful statement that she made there, and I think she's in hopes that the general public will take this just as seriously as she is. Right. Well, Sergei Lavrov has said that Brussels has killed off all cooperation. He said that while speaking with his Chinese counterpart. He also added, "We don't have any relations with the European Union as an organization. The infrastructure of further relations was destroyed by unilateral decisions from Brussels." The comment was made in regards to the entire EU as a bureaucratic system, but relations with individual states are still very alive and active. But Lavrov did say that if the EU wants to mend relations, then Russia will be there.
Well, Russia isn't going to bend over backwards for the EU, and China feels the same way as Russia. Now, Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, said European powers are making accusations against China and Russia, and they know it's a lie and invented pretenses. And attempts to interfere in affairs in China and Russia are long gone. Our resolve, he continued, to uphold international justice remains undiminished. Now, because of how China and Russia have been treated by the EU and the U.S., those circumstances have driven Russia and China closer.
That's right. While the U.S. says that China, not Russia, is the big threat of the future, everything from its GDP, economy, military spending, it eclipses that of Russia. In comparison, of course. Well, one of the latest moves of the EU toward China is the sanctions placed on Beijing because of China's treatment of the Uyghur people for violating their rights. Well, this, of course, has been protested by China, but there is little hope that the EU will change its stance. Both countries look to get rid of the sanction regimes that have affected their countries, that is, China and Russia look to get rid of those regimes over the years. And they also said, looking to the future, if it is said that we're worried about how close China and Russia are growing politically and militarily, they should look back to this moment when sanction-built countries drove them together. So you guys kind of made this monster by creating an outcast of our two countries. We found no other option but to work together.
Right, you pushed us in that direction.
That's right.
Well, Anthony Blinken has been in Brussels to strengthen relations with NATO and EU counterparts after 4 strained years. Now, in an interview with Global Conversation, while in Brussels, he and the U.S. had one central theme in mind, and that was to reaffirm our commitment to NATO alliances and our partnership with the European Union, with our core allies. Now, this trip included stops in Japan and Korea for that very purpose, to renew America's commitment with its alliances and partnerships.
Well, in regards to sanctions on China, he said this was not about ganging up on China or to hold China down or to contain it. It is about standing up together for the interests and values that we share. And one of those that we are invested in for many years is something that we called the rule-based international order. We found that the best way that countries can work together and manage relations productively is to sign up to a common set of rules and commitments, and our challenge is to make sure that we uphold that order, he said. Well, so when China or any other country takes actions to undermine it, we have an obligation to stand up and say that you need to, and in other words, they need to stand up too, and we're much more effective in doing that when we're in solidarity together. So, a global set of rules that everybody can agree with is what the U.S. stance is coming from. China and Russia saying, hey, if that's the case, why are the rules for us different for you? Well, we have, we're not going to, just allow the U.S. to make the rules and not include us in it.
Right, and it is, some of these countries have talked about feeling like they're bullied by the U.S., but of course, Russia and China, very strong countries there, and now when they team together, that's a pretty strong force for the U.S. to deal with, and they have a lot of resources, so they can team up. And as we've talked about, they want to get rid of that petrodollar, and they're taking steps there. So a lot of things in the works there for Russia and China. And of course, the U.S. doesn't like it too much.
No, well, you know, the fact being is that the U.S. is probably seeing the fact that if they're eked out of this market between China and Russia, that's going to be a lot of money lost.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Well, if you'd like to find out more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh. When you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them at any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com. You can go to YisraelHawkins.com or Yahweh'sBranch.com. If you'd like to, you could visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. For any emails, you can email the House of Yahweh by emailing info@Yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen right now. And if you haven't already done so, we encourage you to go look at the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com or the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com. And once again, you can type in any type of scriptural search there, and pages of information will come up on any scriptural topic.
Well, don't go anywhere. Get your pencils, some paper, and of course, if you do have it, scriptures to follow along, because up next for a very informative message, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.